am happy to be on today. It's certainly an honor for all of us to get a chance to visit with you to talk today a bit about this project that we've been doing now for about 3 years. And the title of our talk is really essentially the title of what the work has been on, which is a systems approach to understanding the nutrient cycle across the pork ecosystem. And this was a project that National Pork Board had put a call out for about 3 years ago. And what their focus is really trying to find a way to encompass all the different areas of nutrient utilization across the production of pork products. And again, as I mentioned, that is exactly what we're trying to do here. And so we brought it in as thinking about some of the primary elements that we would consider important when we're thinking about life cycle assessment of nutrients, particularly when we're thinking about environmental impact. And so we looked at nitrogen, and carbon, and sulfur, zinc, and copper as some of our primary elements that we've been investigating for the last few years. Certainly, we're going to start and end with the pig because that is where we're headed here, but we wanted to think about it from a circularity standpoint. So how much is going to actually end up in meat versus how much will, of course, potentially be left into the environment, either into the air or into the soil and potentially reused. And so as Erin mentioned, she is one of our individuals. And so we have a team that are focused on the manure component of what's happening in the manure and how it's being handled and stored. And then, of course, what happens once it's in the soil? Where do those nutrients go? And, how well do they get converted to the next year's crop, which then, of course, gets converted to feed, and then which then, of course, goes back to the pig. And so we have individuals that are experts in all of these different areas, helping us put together this life cycle assessment. And so some of the primary jobs or roles that we've had with this project has really been to first and foremost identify the gaps in knowledge. What do we know about feed efficiency in pigs? How do we improve feed efficiency in pig or nutrient utilization in pigs? What do we know about how manure is stored? And then what happens to those elements in the soil? And what don't we know? And so the team has been working very hard on putting together a series of documents that share what we know and what we don't know to hopefully help, again, focus our future research objectives so that we can, of course, fill those gaps. We've also been working on nutrient models, primarily more recently, how do we help account for things like using manure as a fertilizer versus using synthetic fertilizer? And how do we get credit for that when we think about our carbon credits and our nutrient utilization? And so that is partly what we've been doing there. We've identified certain ingredients, and I'll share that at the end of the presentation, what those are looking like now in terms of those next steps. And then, of course, as I mentioned, we're also working on creating a document at the end of this about what don't we know yet, and what are the big pieces that we feel are important in order for our producers to really have the ability to share with the consumer exactly what their carbon footprint might be or what other nutrients might look like in terms of circularity. I am, as Erin mentioned, the PI for this project, but I cannot do it alone. I certainly am not one that can do all of these different areas. So I have been learning a lot over the last 3 years about some of these other aspects. I myself am a swine nutritionist, and so do work with many other experts in other fields. And so as you can see here, we have a large contingency. We would have Erin Cordes from the University of Minnesota. We have Joel DeRushi, as well as Caitlin, who's unfortunately not on this since she was a newer addition. And then Chuck Rice and Mike Tokash, all would be from Kansas State. Mahmoud Sharara would be from University of North Carolina. We have someone from the industry, which would be Laura Moody from iFeeders and AFIA. And then the rest of that contingency would be from Iowa State University in different areas. So we have genetics, soil, manure, environment, and then, of course, swine nutritionists, all represented in this contingency of team players. And in addition to this, we also meet with an advisory board. So we have individuals from allied industry, as well as some swine producers, and others that are engaged in other organizations like World Wildlife Foundation that have been involved throughout our project, giving us guidance and again, making sure that we're addressing some areas that they have found to be needed in order for them to complete their own life cycle assessments within their operations or within their business. Um, Earlier in this presentation, I gave you a very simplified version of the nutrient cycle that we've been discussing, but as you can see on your screen now, this is a model that we've been working off of. Erin put this together for us, and again, it's really to reiterate some of the challenges that we have in trying to really fully assess where those nutrients are going. And certainly as we talk about life cycle assessments and carbon footprinting, it even indicates there's going to be some challenges as to who gets credit for what part of this cycle um, downstream. But again, it's not a simple task as we start to think through it. But again, today, the conversations that both Caitlin and Erin provided you should hopefully start to give you some insight into some opportunities that we can consider in our own operations to try to minimize those losses and maximize our efficiencies. So where are we at then in terms of our group? So we do have some additional next steps. One of those next steps, as we mentioned earlier, is that we are taking nutrient values for our primary ingredients within the United States. So corn and soybean meal, as well as a few others like sorghum and wheat midds and hominy and distillers, and trying to generate values appropriate for the use of manure in raising those crops. So currently, a lot of groups like to use GFLI for their database for their nutrient values for life cycle assessments. However, those life cycle assessment values only focus on using synthetic fertilizer. And particularly here in the Midwest, we use a lot of course, organic fertilizer courtesy of our pigs. And we want to make sure that our producers have the ability to get credit for that, particularly when we think about that carbon footprint. And so the team is working today with a company called Blanc, and Blanc is helping us generate those values. And we will be feeding those to GFLI here at the beginning of the year in 2026. Additionally, we are, of course, working with LPLC, and we're getting ready to launch a website. That website will have a multitude of fact sheets. I think we'll probably have at least 30 some fact sheets that will take these manuscripts that we've been working on, as well as the content that you saw today, and put it into smaller bite-sized pieces for individuals just to, again, have a quick reference for different components or opportunities to use some of this technology to, of course, put into their systems. And again, then also what we're working on will be infographics and, of course, webinar links onto that LPLC website for any additional work that we're doing. I think there was actually a comment in the Q&A section. There are two manuscripts that are currently already published. Those are both in the Journal of Animal Science. And those links are here. And then, of course, I think you will have access to these slides as well. And so you can go back to those DOIs if you don't get those jotted down in the moment. But those two fact sheets currently, Deckers will focus on the genetics component, and then Navalis would be a good portion of what Caitlin presented today. We do have another manuscript that is ready to go that will be focusing on some of the mineral component that also was discussed today. And the manure one is in review, and the one on soil has been reviewed, and they just submitted the revisions yesterday. So we would anticipate that that will be published here shortly. So we will provide those links as well on the LPLC website, again, so that you have a way to get to those. But these are open access links, and so you should be able to get to those. So additionally, what we are doing, we have a second grant that came from the first grant. And again, this grant's with the National Pork Board. And what we're getting ready to do in February is we're going to be engaging some of our producers across the nation and sharing with them again some of the technologies and options and hearing from them, what works for them, what hasn't worked for them, where have they found frustration, for example, trying to generate an LCA for their systems. And then, of course, try to challenge them a little bit with what we're working on in terms of some tools to make some decisions and incorporate some new technologies into their operations. And then from that, we're going to come back in a few months and look at some case studies on, what did you do after this workshop? What did you incorporate into your operations and what is working for you now? And so we'll be doing some kind of hands-on, if you will, for all of this work that we've been doing, getting into the producers' hands at that point and really letting them take the lead and showing us what they still feel like they need in order to be effective. In addition to that, as I mentioned at the beginning, we'll be creating those gaps in knowledge and providing that document to the National Pork Board. And so with that, I do want to thank many of our collaborators here. Of course, the North Carolina State team, as well as the Kansas State University team, as well as University of Minnesota group, as well as, of course, our colleagues here at Iowa State University. And again, we can't do this work without sponsorship and support. And so we've certainly had that with iFeeder and Pork Checkoff, and numerous commodity groups have come forward to help us with the next step with the GFLI. And so we do want to thank everyone for their engagement.